Hello, welcome back. I'm Ken. We're visiting with Mike. Mike, we've talked about lots of ways to have helpful change in organizations of all kinds. What's next?
Well, I was thinking about, you know, what would be a good example of change. And I think the one of the stories that I like best is Exodus,
Oh,
when God took Israel out of Egypt. And it's an interesting blueprint, separate from the religious or uh, spiritual considerations that you could have into that, but just to look at to say, how did he take a group of people who had been generations in a foreign country? At the end, they were subject to being slaves. So you have to wonder, what did those people believe in, or what were they like, kind of thing. Uh, but the point is that he was going to take them to the promised land, and that being God, you would think that he never fails, which is interesting because he never fails, but he also leaves us the power of personal decisions. So it's very, very sobering when you look at that story, especially when you look at the punchline when, after all the good things that God did, they refused to go into the promised land and they had to be stuck in the desert for another 40 years until the people who refused to go passed away and a new generation then would have a chance to go. So, so if God could do it, it gives you an idea of the challenge that it is to change people's mind, to change attitude, to change values, to change mindset. And many stories, like for instance Nehemiah that we talked about, they were successful. They rebuilt the wall. He stayed a few years in there. Then he went back to Susa to his previous job. And guess what? People revert back to the old ways.
yeah.
And it didn't take long or years. It was months, and everything was back to. So it's a real challenge. But recognizing that, then the question then becomes, what are the building blocks, at least, that you should put in place? And that's where I see the story of Exodus helpful, because it really has phases or stages or building blocks that hopefully will get people to change their mind, to change their attitudes, to change their heart. And the first question is when you look at a map of supposedly the route that they followed, and when you look and you see there's the Mediterranean Sea, and then you could have gone along the coastline and be there in fewer days, a lot fewer days. In 3 days, you could have been there. Why? Why did you go around that way? Because it doesn't make any sense. So, and the Bible doesn't tell you we took a long way. Well, it does say they were afraid that, God would realize that people would be facing adversity and therefore they would be reluctant to move forward. But I think there's another reason. And what it illustrates is it takes time to change mindset. It takes months, it takes years. Personally, in my own consulting business, on the average, not that there is a magic number, but I found that it takes at least 3 years for new habits to to become the pattern of behavior.
3 years.
It takes a fair amount of time. So the point is if you're if you're going to introduce some ideas, be ready for what I would call the long haul, because 3 years is a long time as far as I'm
Yes.
concerned.
Yes. Organization.
Um, so, and that's, I think, whether for the first lesson to be drawn from Exodus is that God didn't choose the shortcut, even though he could have paved the way and whatever else he could have done to get them there in 3 days. The point is, if they had been there, they wouldn't have had the time to adopt new, new way of thinking, or even experience all the miracles and all the things that God did for them. So I don't want to make it sound like a religious or a Bible commentary, but more one of looking at the reality of change. That it's a journey, and it takes a fair amount of time. Um, when we talked about adopting new habits, I looked up on the internet to try to see how long does it take. Well, they say that for a new habit, it takes 18 days to 254 days. The Library of National Library of Medicine talks from 4 days to 335. So, it's say a year. Well,
Yeah. Wow.
this is one habit. So if you're talking about a mindset, which is
Yeah.
a lot more, then guess what? It's a lot bigger challenge than that.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that you have to realize. The second thing to realize is that there'll be hiccups. Again, when you look at the experience with the Exodus, every time that the people experience difficulties, food, water, a number of things, guess what? They wanted to go back to Egypt. You've got to be kidding. You left there because your life was miserable and you want to go back? You've got to be kidding. But that's the challenge, is that people, until they get accustomed to the new way of doing things,
Hmm.
the tendency is always to say, I want to go back to what I'm familiar with. So how do you build that change so that it won't deteriorate in a short order? Uh, the other part I was thinking of is a contrast that there is between Japanese way of doing things and Western ways. And the one thing is the hiring of people. In Japan, the majority of the people are hired and start at the entry level at one time during the year. April 1st is the day that people are hired, students are hired, or young people are hired, and they start as a cohort. In other words, the company figures, well, we'll need 20 people, 50 people, 100 people, whatever the number is, and they all start at the same time. And the reason they do that is they essentially have a philosophy that says you have to become part of the company. You become a company person. You have to adopt a company thinking. And if you go to Toyota, the thinking process is different from, say, Nissan or Honda or anybody else. So that when you start somewhere else or somewhere, there's less people moving from one place to another. There's a little bit more these days, but still, in general, the majority is you stick to the company that you start with. So that's one thing. They all start together, and as such, then they develop a relationship. It's a cohort, you develop links with those people. And I didn't realize how important that was until one day I was driven back to the train station by a fellow, and I asked him, if you have problems, what do? You talk to your boss? Oh, he says, oh no, I never. The first thing that I do is I call up all the buddies that I have made during my orientation, and I get their opinion, their suggestions.
Interesting.
So, so exactly it's a strength really that you could say in the organization, because then you're not feeling that you're alone. You've got a group of people that you can rely on for assistance. And that's not saying that they'll never talk to their boss, but the point is they want to do their homework before they talk to the boss, kind of thing.
Sure. I
So
have been taught that, I'll say, United States culture is really emphasizing the individual, and
yes,
Japanese culture really emphasizes the group. It's not about you, it's about
yes,
your family, it's about the
exactly,
group you are a part of.
exactly.
And now I know that they hire a group. I didn't realize that. And it's on
Yeah,
April 1st.
yeah,
And that group has a group consciousness. They stick together and
yes,
they talk to each other. Thank
exactly,
you. Thank you for
exactly.
that.
So the point is when we're talking about building a mindset, it doesn't happen by accident. You've got to work at it. You've got to set up a system that will foster the adoption of the thinking that you want everybody to have. You know, how
Um,
do you solve problems? How do you identify waste? How do you, there's all kinds of different things that you can learn during that period. Uh, and you have to have a network of people that you're linked to, that you feel that you have a relationship with. So that's one thing. So the second part of that, well, before that, one day I was in Osaka, and I saw a group of 30 people, young people, all in black suits, following whatever it is. And I was surprised, and I said to my translator, what's this? Oh, he says, those are new employee freshmen. It's freshmen, but there's women as well as men, kind of thing. And they're all going through their training program. So the point is you know, it's part of the way they do things. Second part of that is orientation. You know, when I started in my first job, uh, the first half day was probably what I would call orientation, if you want to call it that. And really, it wasn't orientation. It really was to fill in the forms for insurance, for social security, for address, whatever, you know, all kinds of different pieces of paperwork that needs to be done. And then they took me on the floor and they showed me how the product was being made. Not just me, there was about half a dozen other guys with me. And that was it. And then I was back into my department. And okay, now you do your thing, kind of thing. So it's a very limited investment, you could say, as compared to a Japanese orientation where anything from 2 to 6 weeks, people will go through orientation. And there, essentially, what you're looking at is the history, the values, the principles, and the various topics that the company feels are important. So again, the whole idea is during those 2 weeks is to develop a mindset, to get people to think that way, to think the Toyota way, to think the Kawasaki way, to think of, you know, whatever it is that you're thinking of, what's important in the company. And the other thing is if you meet somebody, the first thing they will say, hi, I'm from Toyota. My name is Mike Mestring, which is different from the Western way that says you introduce yourself, your name, you know, what company you're with, may or may not be said. So the point is there is again the emphasis is to become part of the company mindset. So if you deal with me, you're more than dealing with me. You're dealing with a company that I'm representing and the values that it stands for. Excuse me. So there's a real effort to build that sense of who we are and not assume that people will pick it up as they work in the workplace.
And it takes
Um,
time.
and it takes time. Yeah. 2 weeks is probably the minimum that I've seen. Some places is even more than that. Like
Yeah.
they will have a period of time where people will move from one department to another department to understand the intricacies of what those other people do, so that when they go back in their job, they have a real appreciation for the various departments, who the people are, and what they do.
They understand how what they do can create headaches for others
Yeah,
and how to avoid that.
exactly.
The company that just shows you around and sends you to your department is either saying that mindset isn't important to them or they don't understand how important mindset is because that doesn't give them a chance to develop the mindset they want.
What it illustrates is that the leadership, we'll go back again to the leadership has a lack of appreciation. And there's a different, like you mentioned before, the individuality trumps anything else. Well, the, individuality is not denied by having a company mindset, as far as I'm concerned. But you have to have some principles, some ways of behaving and doing things that are common, and not only to you, but the whole organization from the top down. The same values, the same approach, the same thinking is is really shared by every level. So that, let's say, for instance, when I mentioned before, we visited the glass factory in Japan, and one of the executives from Tokyo had come to take us around, which was, phenomenal. But anyway, the point was is that his behavior was demonstrating the values that the company supposedly professed. So it was more just a matter of a logo or a slogan. It's more of a actual behavior, and their actions, their discussions were reflecting the kinds of things that they wanted everybody else to have the same values, the same way of approaching things. The reality is very few workplaces have worked out or spelled out in detail the values, the principles, the approach, the techniques that the company uses. Uh, and managers and leaders are hard pressed to verbalize what that is. So if they can't, how are they going to convey it? So
They
then
don't
you've got a
they don't
mismatch of things,
communicate it if they can't articulate it. That's for sure.
right?
We're
So
about
then
out
we
of
get,
time. If
oh, okay.
we may need to go to a part two on this if you have a bunch more to share with us.
Well, part two will be just to look at maybe some of the building blocks that God used with the journey that
Sure.
Israel went through,
Let's plan
because
on that
then you
next
can
time.
look and say, okay, how is that uh, idea, that concept, transferable in my situation, in my family, in my church, or in my whatever, so that there is that kind of commonality.
Excellent.
Because the
So
strength is having a team. Okay.
So building blocks next. Thank you very much for this.
You're welcome. My time in Japan was very a blessing. It really was. I've been there maybe 20, 30 times. And
I'm
every
thinking
time I just love it.
I'm thinking you were a blessing to them too. That's why they kept inviting you back.
uh,
Well,
no.
enough for this week. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day too. Take care.